Hello, and welcome to Matter of Fact, a podcast from the Roy Howard Community Journalism Center, where we report what matters. I'm your host, Hilawe Tibebe. With support from the Scripps Howard Foundation, our center works to counter misinformation and strengthen truth-based journalism across communities in Southeast Mississippi. Today's episode is based on our RHCJC News article, North Lamar Weighs Ending Water Fluoridation. The conversation centers around a proposal to end the decades-long practice of adding fluoride to drinking water. It's a decision that could affect more than 12,000 customers, and one that's raising questions about safety, cost, and public health. In this episode, we're diving deeper, exploring why the debate over fluoride is about more than water quality. For many residents, it's about trust, safety, and who gets to decide what's best for their community. We'll start by breaking down what led to this decision, what's at stake for local residents, and how state officials are responding. Then we'll talk with the reporter Kristen Kaylor about how this story came together, and what it reveals about small-town decision-making and public trust. In Oak Grove, Mississippi, a routine notice in the mail has sparked an unexpected conversation about what flows from the tap. The North Lamar Water Association is considering ending its long-standing practice of adding fluoride to drinking water, a public health measure that has been in place for decades. Fluoride has been added to U.S. water systems since 1945. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention calls it one of the 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century, saying it helps strengthen tooth enamel and reduce cavities by about 25%. But decision makers in North Lamar, which is owned by the customers and overseen by a board, say keeping levels steady can be difficult and costly for small rural systems. Kim Burge has worked at the association for 37 years and says that they haven't put fluoride in water in years.
The reason we send out letters. Our fluoride machine is, it's not just machine. Fluoride equipment, the wells, they have been down, and we were not able to get parts. It's hard to get a hold of. It's not just costly, but it's also hard to get hold of since COVID.
The association serves between 12 to 13,000 people, about 5,000 meters roughly. And Burge says water systems around them have already quietly ended fluoridation, some without making it official.
Only the cities provide it, and two of the cities' fluoride machines are broke, and they're not providing.
However, the State Department of Health disputes that claim. Officials say 201 public systems across Mississippi still adjust levels, including several non-city-run water associations and departments. RHCJC News also couldn't independently verify if any city utility departments are currently dealing with broken fluoride machines. But Burge says the goal of sending letters about possibly ending fluoridation was simply to make the association's status clear for consumers. For customers, the debate isn't just about cost, it's also about trust and safety. Brandon Lee is a North Lamar customer and a Hattiesburg small business owner. He's also a 22-year professional firefighter and says the fluoride debate for him starts with safety.
So to take it out, I feel like that gives us to implement certain practices inside the house. Okay, we're going to consume certain items that can fill that gap instead of depending on the government to provide it for us. And also I read that some people, it's not a large.
Now you did mention that you have family here. Have you or your children are...
It's a very real concern and an issue that's already happened at North Lamar. A 2019 Consumer Confidence report showed levels exceeded recommended amounts by more than double in 2017. According to NIDCR, the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research, there are side effects to having too much fluoride. For children under 8, it can cause a condition called dental fluorosis, which can show up as white spots on their teeth, or in extreme cases, pits. NIDCR reports that very high levels, like what you could get from consuming fluoride products, can cause nausea and vomiting, and long-term exposure to excessively high levels can cause skeletal fluorosis, but that's extremely rare in the U.S., and NIDCR reports there is no evidence it is caused by the recommended level of fluoride in public tap water. North Lamar customer Brian Street says now knowing risks, the decision about fluoridation needs to be taken seriously.
Knowing it now, it does land, a bit of a concern, because if we end up on the higher end for long enough, like what damage could that do? and what added costs, can that bring upon the company and, also be handed down to us. So I feel like, taking it out is a choice that can really give a lot more autonomy to the individual and decrease a lot of the risk, that comes in play with it being in place already.
The U.S. Public Health Service recommends for oral health benefits, fluoride levels be about 0.7 parts per million, what's called ppm. Natural groundwater levels already contain fluoride, some areas up to 4 ppm. While the CDC does not mandate community water fluoridation, they do track levels. Data from North Lamar shows fluoride has likely not been added since 2020. Around the time, Bird says replacement parts became difficult to find. And to add to the stress, she says it poses a risk for workers who handle it.
One of our operators, they say a drop got on the concrete and it ate through the concrete. And it kind of just, people don't like to handle stuff like that.
But she says if association members decide to keep fluoridation, the workers will add it in.
Now, if they say, we're going to go ahead and get all new machines, get a whole new setup, they're going to be willing to put the fluoride in the water. They're willing to do it. They're just a little apprehensive.
Lee, the firefighter you heard from at the beginning of the story, says he deals with hazardous materials on a regular basis.
Where when it's in the outside source hands, it may damage more people than me taking it into my own hands.
Okay. And then to kind of touch on the last part that they had said, keeping up with the maintenance of the levels themselves. Now, it's recommended that they have about a 0.7, I think it's milligrams per liter of fluoride in the water. But the North Lamar said that their levels are usually anywhere from 0.6 to 1.2. Now, has that ever concerned you at all or anything?
Well, I didn't know that statistic. Now it does land, a bit of a concern, because if we end up on the higher end for long enough, like what damage could that do? And what added costs, can that bring upon the company?
The American Dental Association points out that fluoridation is a regulated process and is subject to federal safety standards. It claims that facility personnel who use proper protective equipment limit hazardous exposure to fluoride. The Mississippi State Department of Health echoes those claims. The agency's director of oral health, Veronica Gates, gave us this statement. It reads, quote, "There are no risks. Water operators have the opportunity to be trained on the appropriate steps to take to apply fluoride to our water systems." End quote. She also said that the department offered grants over the summer to water systems with existing fluoridation programs to help cover equipment, on the condition of continuing fluoridating for at least 3 years, and that all employees handling fluoride equipment complete CDC training. No systems signed up. Lee says if North Lamar took advantage of the grant program and ensured training for workers, he would want to keep it in the system. Others say leaving it to individuals gives families more control. The debate over fluoridation has intensified on the national level. Children's Health Defense, aligned with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., cited studies suggesting fluoride is a developmental neurotoxin and has questioned the practice's safety. In April, Kennedy said he would move to end the CDC's recommendation for community water fluoridation. Following that announcement, the American Dental Association reaffirmed support for fluoridation, calling it safe and effective at the recommended level, pointing out that fluoridation is regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act and additives must meet independent safety standards. The Dental Association also cited multiple studies indicating tooth decay tends to rise if a community ends fluoridation, even when products such as fluoride toothpaste and rinses are widely used. Currently, about 55% of Mississippians receive fluoridated water, despite about 97% of the state getting water from a public system. Gates says fluoride supplements can be substituted for fluoridated water, but those require a prescription from a dentist. She pointed out that access may be difficult, especially for lower-income families. The story you just heard was reported and produced in part by RACJC News reporter Kristen Kaylor. She spent weeks talking with Oak Grove residents, Water Association officials, and state health experts to understand what's really behind the proposal to end water fluoridation and what it reveals about how small-town decisions get made. Kristen joins us now to talk about how this story came together. Kristen, thank you for being here. Initially, let's pull back the curtain on how this story was first reported by you and your team. How did this story come to your attention?
Yeah, so one of the customers for the Water Association actually reached out to us and sent us a copy of the letter that they had received, telling us that the association was going to stop fluoridating the water, and they really just wanted to know more about that and how that was going to play out.
And what would you say was like a challenging part to securing the story and making it actually, oh, this is going to be something that's coming out by the end of the week?
So honestly, talking to residents, we went door to door trying to talk to people, and it was the middle of the week, so it was definitely busy, and a lot of people either just kind of didn't answer, or honestly, some people didn't really know about the fluoride as a whole. They said that they didn't even know it was in their water or really what its purpose was. So we had a little bit of trouble with that, but thankfully we had some really great residents come out and actually speak to us. But also just getting in contact in general, that's a general thing with reporting. But we did struggle a little bit with hearing back from the officials and people that we needed to talk to. But overall, it really wasn't super difficult, thankfully.
And would you say there were any like big surprises that you came across as you were getting in contact with those city officials?
Yeah, honestly, I think it was less so about the contact, but about the information that we learned. So like it says in the story, these residents, they had gotten the letter that they were going to stop fluoridating the water, but it turns out that there had not been fluoride in the water, at least very, very low levels, since about 2019, if I recall correctly. So that was a big surprise, and that really kind of a little bit more beyond what we were expecting. So.
And that makes sense. And like you were talking about realizing the actual facts behind water fluoridation in these communities, was it difficult to balance that scientific context with the local opinions? And how did you and the other journalists on your team, how did y'all decide what information to prioritize?
So in terms of balancing the context between local opinions, it really just kind of boils down to, doing your research before you do your reporting and before you do your interviews. So you kind of have to discern what is factual, especially for the community that you're reporting in. So making sure that you have your facts straight and then speaking to those residents, and ensuring that you're telling them the right thing. So like I said, some of them didn't really know what we were talking about. So being able to give them that information and then letting them give us their feedback was really important. So I would say, honestly, it was really relatively easy to balance. Some people had opinions, some people didn't. It really just depended on the individual. So, but the way that we decided what information to prioritize was, what was going to impact the community most. So, like I said, them getting rid of the fluoride, we wanted to tell people when that was going to happen, how that was going to happen, how that was going to affect them. So the research that we did, that mostly influenced our interviews. So we kind of discussed how that was going to impact them, and that really helped us to get the feedback that we were kind of searching for and hoping to find within the community.
Did you have any issues originally contacting the Water Association?
So to be honest, my lead reporter Sam was the one that did most of the contact with the association. I was kind of there in the background, but we did struggle a little bit at first, but they did finally get back to us a little bit and give us a little more information. So it wasn't necessarily difficult. Everyone's busy. There's a lot going on in everybody's lives. So I wouldn't call it difficult, but it did take us a little hot second.
Yeah, maybe a couple hiccups along the road.
Yeah, for sure.
And did that give you guys a sense of how much trust residents have in their local water board or in public health authorities?
That's a good one. So as someone who's really not from Mississippi and I don't know as much about the rural communities, obviously I know more now, it did kind of give me a sense on how they feel, and actually it gave me a bigger sense of how much information that they're actually getting from these local authorities. And it also kind of showed me what they're really looking for in these authorities, the kind of information that they're needing and they're seeking, especially for families. We interviewed Mr. Brian Street, who had a family in his home, and he gave us a lot of really interesting feedback when we interviewed him. But yeah, I would say it gave me a pretty good sense on the trust that's around that community and for other communities as well.
And I have a little bit of a hard-hitting question, on the topic of speaking to residents and really getting that all-rounded perspective. You spoke with several residents, and how did you and your team lead, how did you guys go about choosing whose voices to include in the article, in the video, and in the radio package?
Yeah, so, I mean, to be completely honest, we tried to use everyone that we interviewed. So I think what we were really looking for was all of the different perspectives, just to kind of be able to connect with every individual that might read the article or watch the package or listen to the radio, just to be able to give people more than one angle. It was, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was a difficult process at all. So, like I said, we wanted to be inclusive and we wanted to make sure that every resident felt heard. Among those that we interviewed and among those who would be receiving the article. So, yeah.
And yeah, as far as the audio essay in the prior segment, we didn't get a chance to include all the residents who Kristen spoke with, but you definitely can find out more about that on our website, and that can be found at racjcnews.com. So throughout the reporting journey, you heard people use words like trust, safety, and choice. What do those themes tell us about this community?
Yeah, so for me personally, I think, with a smaller community, especially like Oak Grove where we were reporting, everybody knows everybody, and trust, safety, and choice is a big matter, rural or in bigger communities, bigger cities. That's always going to be important, especially when it's affecting, people's health, people's livelihoods. So I think that honestly, it was a really good thing to hear people talk about it so much. I think that for me personally, it told me that they were very involved. It told me that they cared. Just in general, this is something that people care about, and it's something that they deserve to know. Like I said, especially if it's affecting your health, your livelihood, your family, your friends, that's something that you want to stay informed on. So.
And that definitely makes sense, how the citizens are wanting a say in the laws that affect their day-to-day lives. Mm-hmm. And so throughout the reporting process of this story, did anything change the way you think about local decision-making in rural areas? And that's if you had a perception prior to begin with. So just walk me through a little bit of that process.
So for me personally, this goes for a smaller or a bigger community. I feel like citizens and residents should always have some sort of say. Like authorities should be listening to what these people have to say, especially if it's affecting them. That goes for any community. So it didn't really change my perceptions per se. I always think that local decision making, there should be conversations being had, meetings being held. Every voice deserves to be heard. I think that kind of goes without saying. So.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about the process of storytelling. What was your favorite part of producing this story?
Ooh, that's a good one. So obviously the research part, just because I get really into all of the stories that I help write and produce. So doing the research part was definitely interesting. But I would say my favorite part was probably going door to door and doing interviews, which sounds kind of odd, but it was my first time ever doing that. I described it at first as like trick-or-treating, just without the treat for the most part. But doing that as a first-time experience, especially with the team, was a lot of fun, despite it being a little hot out. But I enjoyed that, and just being able to collaborate and talk to people and listen to people speak. That's just kind of an everything for every story. But for this one, yeah.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you guys had a blast. Did you learn anything unique from this experience as a reporter about journalism or about the community?
Yeah, for sure. At least from the community perspective, it really always is just nice to see how united a community is, especially when they have shared interests, kind of collaborating and working with one another, whether that be in person, over social media, getting things like this, getting the information that they're wanting, the ability of a community to work together, again, big or small, is always really inspiring to me. In terms of journalism, like I said, doing the door-to-door interviews was a first-time thing for me, so that was really interesting. But I think from a learning experience, just really learning to double down and do your research, and, being sensitive to these topics, no matter how casual they might seem. This is something that affects people's livelihoods, and you always have to remember that as a journalist, no matter what you're doing. So yeah, I would say being sensitive, respecting the community that you're with or that you're in, that kind of goes without saying as a journalist, but for me, I would say treat every community as your own.
That's beautiful. Finally, what advice would you give other student reporters who are covering stories that combine science and community impact?
I would definitely say just, make sure that you do your research. Make sure that you're getting accurate research. It took us a couple of days to make sure that we had all of our facts straight. We always want to do that when it comes to reporting with real life communities that affect real life people and families. So, just make sure that you're being sensitive about it. Make sure you're giving out the right information and receiving the right information. If you have to fact check with people, spend the time to do that. If you're ever unsure or uncertain, don't be afraid to ask people. Don't be afraid to reach out because, at the end of the day, this is your job. It's your job to help people. And, yeah.
Kristen Kaylor, thank you for your reporting and for helping us understand how even the smallest local decisions can ripple through a community. Now it's time for What is True, our fact-checking segment where we break down common claims, talk about how to verify them, and give you tools to spot what's real. Joining us is Walker Scott, our What is True Media Literacy Coordinator. Walker oversees our fact-checking investigations and leads the center's Ask Me What is True community media literacy trainings. Walker, we've heard a lot of questions about fluoride, but one thing that confuses people is the difference between natural fluoride and added fluoride. Can you explain what that really means?
Sure. So, natural fluoride is a mineral that already exists in groundwater. It's created when water passes through rocks and soil that contain fluoride compounds. Depending on where you live, your tap water could already have a small amount of it. They add enough to reach the optimal amount recommended for dental health, about 0.7 parts per million. That's roughly the same as 1 drop in a 10-gallon tank of water. The key thing to know is that not all systems add fluoride, and even when they do, it's supposed to be highly regulated. The goal is to balance it so people get the benefits for their teeth without going over safe limits.
Okay, so if someone wants to know whether their community adds fluoride or if it's just naturally occurring, how can they check?
Well, the easiest way is to use the CDC's My Water's Fluoride database. You can search by state, county, or even water system name, which would be listed on your water bill. If your system is in a database, it will tell you whether the fluoride has been added and the most recent test level. But not every system reports data regularly, especially the smaller ones. So if you don't see yours, that doesn't necessarily mean they don't fluoridate. In that case, you can also check your system's annual Consumer Confidence Report. That's usually mailed to customers or posted online. It's required by law and lists all substances tested in your drinking water, including fluoride.
And there's also a more hands-on way that people can check, right?
Yes. Home water testing kits are another great option. You can buy a simple one online or at most hardware stores for about $15, and they're surprisingly thorough. Most kits include tests for fluoride, total and free chlorine, hardness, alkalinity, nitrates, nitrites, iron, copper, calcium, and pH. They don't replace professional testing, but they can help you spot unusual readings or confirm what your utility report says. And if your results look off, you can take that to your water provider or state health department for a follow-up testing.
So the big takeaway here is there are reliable science-based ways to check what's in your water and to confirm whether fluoride is added.
Exactly. The goal isn't to scare people, it's to help them verify information before sharing or assuming something's wrong. Whether it's fluoride or anything else, the best first step is to go straight to the source: official data, verified reports, and reputable testing.
And that's What is True with Media Literacy Coordinator Walker Scott. You can learn more about the program or submit a question of your own at racjcnews.com/WITREQ or by calling 601-266-TRUE. That's 601-266-8783. This episode was adapted from our RHCJC News article, North Lamar Ways Ending Water Fluoridation. We'd like to recognize the journalists who originally reported this story: Samuel Hughes, Nishchit Sharma, and of course Kristen Kaylor, who you heard from on the show. You can read their full story and related reporting at r8cjcnews.com. Be sure to follow us on social media at r8cjcnews to keep up with stories just like this one. As always, thank you for listening and for spending time with us as we take you behind the scenes of the Roy Howard Community Journalism Center. I'm Hilawe Tibebe, and this is Matter of Fact.